Welcome to The Empty Canvas, the podcast about how creativity begins. I'm the host, Pascal Anson, and today I'm joined by artist and potter Will Martin.
Hey,
Welcome.
thank you very much.
I think probably we should explain how we know each other. Because I was thinking about this morning.
Do you remember? Because it's very early and I haven't woken up yet.
Well, I think I started following you on Instagram, and then I saw you on the train with some friends. And then I messaged you and I said, hey, was that you on the train with your friends going to like Seven Oaks or somewhere?
Yeah.
And then I think then probably we started
Chatting then.
chatting and talking after that. And I've been following your work and following what you do. Well, is that right for me to introduce you as a potter, a ceramicist? Ceramicist first, potter second?
I'm a pottery slut. I don't really mind.
Okay.
All the terms apply. I think that people endlessly try to make hierarchies and it's just all the same thing.
Okay.
I'm always material based and always process based first. So I don't, if someone needs to call themselves a ceramicist, that's absolutely fine. They are working with ceramics, I suppose, but that could also mean that you make toilets. So,
Yeah.
it's an ambiguous phrase, and I think that, like most things, it's contested. In which case, I'm just here for all of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. That's clear. When I was thinking about talking to you and material, as you just mentioned, I was wondering about this idea of empty canvas, because it sometimes is a metaphor. It's not an actual empty canvas, but for a painter, it might be an actual canvas that's primed. Can you tell me what the empty canvas is for you? Is it the wheel? Is it the material? What might it be?
For me, it's actually a length of time. The empty canvas for me is, I often think in 6 to 8 week blocks, and I'm very project based. So if I haven't got a project on the go, or something's coming to an end, then my hackles kind of rise and I'm like, oh God, what's going to happen? So for me, that big blank space is actually the next length of time. Mm-hmm. So as a ceramicist and as a potter and as an artist, I activate my work through participation and through community engagement. So I'll be doing supper clubs or events, or I'll be, helping create spaces like art fairs or this kind of thing. And if I don't have one or two things lined up back to back, I get a bit anxious. Mm-hmm. So whenever a dinner comes to an end, I have that like maybe half a day spike of, oh my God, that was so amazing, followed by another half a day of, oh my God, what next? I'm useless, nothing will ever exist again. And I have to kind of go, okay, well, let's make another project.
But is that 6 to 8 week time frame also something to do with the nature of the material, of clay, of kind of thinking about what you're going to do, preparing it, making it in its kind of wet form, and then doing multiple firings and, ahead with some sort of built-in time of the kiln exploding and everything.
Exactly, yeah.
Being in pieces.
Yeah.
So that period, that block is part of, I guess, that might be different if you're, I don't know, an animator or an illustrator.
Yeah, there's a material constraint. This is why I predominantly work in process-based media. I think printmaking has a lot of parallels with ceramics as well. Mm-hmm. A big part of it is handing over your action to a third party. In my case, a third party is the kiln, or in printmaking case, a third party is the press. And you don't actually have control over that. You can create the parameters for what you hope will come out, but you're also hoping for like a 10, 15%, just a moment of surprise. So you want to be surprised. You want to be like, oh, I wasn't expecting that. And if you aren't getting that, then I kind of lose interest.
Absolutely. I'm such a firm believer in that thing of kind of, not necessarily putting an obstacle in your way, but putting this element of, it's not really a mistake, but it's kind of unpredictability. And I think when things are just kind of mechanized and churned out, I think that's sort of interesting. Maybe we'll get to that a bit later on in terms of like batch production or, things appearing similar, but then there's nuance within glaze or form or something in the batch. Can we just go back a little bit further to what you're saying about that period where one project ends and the new one starts? Is there a kind of overlap in terms of whilst the end process is happening, you're at the beginning process of the next 6 to 8 weeks or phase?
Ideally, in terms of, I mean, I can answer both those questions because when you are trying to make something that is similar, you maybe only get like a 70%, 6% success rate of similarity.
Is this in a batch of
In a batch.
Bottles or?
So if I make 10 vases,
Yeah.
maybe 6 or 7 of them will be look like they're from the same family, which means that maybe 3 or 4 don't. But what's exciting about that 3 or 4 is that one of those might spark the next batch or the next idea.
Yeah.
So it's about leaving space for the mistake to birth the next batch.
So how do you get to that point then where you can embrace a mistake and you see it as an advantage? Because I think a lot of people think of mistakes as faults or something wrong. And you talk about it in a kind of calm way of a mistake being something really positive, but I think we all need to work at getting to that point where a mistake feels like great.
Yeah.
How did you do that?
Well, I think so. My background is in cultural studies. I did English, art history, and anthropology at the University of Cape Town. And because of that, we were always talking about culture. And culture, the idea of cultivating, comes from taking a small sample of something you like and then growing it on. And if you just think about yogurt or cheeses or kimchi or any of that, you're taking, or even something like if you're inoculating soil or mushrooms or your own gut biome, you're taking a small amount of something that you like and you're growing it on into a larger batch to see what it does.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you are making 10 of anything, I don't know if it's applicable necessarily to like exhibition design, but if you're doing 10 prototypes,
Mm-hmm.
you can choose one thing and then expand it. And that way you're not seeing it as a mistake, you're seeing it as an organic development of your process. So I'm very process-oriented and not goal-oriented.
Mm-hmm.
I come from a very goal-oriented family, so the idea that you follow a linear path to get to a desired result implies that you know what you're doing. And the thing is that you will never have complete control over your environment, and also you could be wrong.
And also it's not that interesting.
And also it's boring. Like, why do I want to do the same thing if I already know the result? So I would say absolutely embrace the deviation, because that could be your next big thing. And I say that in a very literal way, because like, for instance, I was making pasta bowls. What I think of a pasta bowl is a small bowl with a wide rim that you put a single serving of pasta in as like an antipasta, as a pre-meat. And it's very hard to get a wide rim on the wheel because the centrifugal force of the wheel is trying to make it spin out and collapse. So you're constantly fighting gravity. I kept on having my rims collapse and I was like, I hate this. I don't want this to happen. And then I was like, okay, well, it keeps happening, so you might as well do it intentionally.
Yeah.
So I was like, before gravity did it for me, I curved the rim. And then I made a whole new range of bowls that look like pebbles with this big, beautiful curved rim. And I now see it as a core of one of the shapes that I'm producing.
So what I'm hearing is that something you were fighting against or you saw as a mistake then became an aspect, an element of what you were making. It wasn't even really embracing the mistake. It was sort of getting to the mistake before like the mistake happened.
Absolutely.
That's a very interesting way of looking at it, I think, because a lot of the time people bandy around a phrase which is the art is in the mistake, which I kind of understand, because if you're replicating things that look photorealistic or they look like a copy of something, it's boring because you know what the outcome is before you started. So there's a connection to what you just said there. But I guess this is another sort of, what I really like about what you said is there's like another approach to mistake, which is relax, embrace it, and use the mistake as the hero and not as the villain.
Yeah, cultivate mistakes. So there's also a lot of waste. When I say waste is like is its own problematic category. In that I don't think waste necessarily exists. It's only if you're not resourceful. So being resourceful is a huge part of my practice. So if I make something that I'm happy with the shape of it, but say maybe, not to get too technical, but say I didn't compress the base enough and there wasn't enough density of clay to stop a crack from forming. If a crack forms in the bottom, but it's still going to be watertight, I won't throw them away. I'll set them aside, and then I'll do all my glaze tests with them.
Oh, yeah.
Because I hate the idea of making a specific object for a test, because you're making a useless object that you're going to discard.
Yeah.
So if I'm going to make a glaze test, I'm going to make something that I can use. And it's only in spending time with it and using it that I can fully understand it. So if you've got something that hasn't quite worked out, like it's got an S crack in it, I will then go and do a color combination I'm playing around with or thinking about, and then I'll sit with it and maybe use it a few times and go yes or no. And again, maybe only 1 in 5 of those works out. But another example of that is I'm currently making a range of work that looks like Japanese lacquerware, where it's in those kind of shapes, but the inside is glazed with like a terracotta tomatoey red color, and the outside is in a classic glaze called tenmoku, but like an electric version of it. So it's not made in the traditional way, but it's traditional glaze that's often used in local studios. So doing a few tests with the broken ones meant I found a colorway that I really enjoyed, and I was like, okay, great, now I can pursue that. And now I have a whole new range.
So, I mean, that sounds like such a, again, you talk about it as a kind of very matter-of-fact way of working, but I think this idea of testing something before you start, because firing is expensive and you use material, and if it's not the right material, you're wasting it, as you say. So I think there's a very interesting thing here about going through a process of testing lots of things before you then embark on, and there's precedents with fashion designers where they twirl in canvas before they use the expensive fabric. But I guess you grow in confidence when you make tests, right? And then you see you can then make a decision of like, I like that one, I don't like that one.
Yeah.
Or I need to do this. I like that one, but I need to do that again and make it better.
Absolutely.
I think that's kind of something that we can all get on board with more. And I think often as a designer, I feel like I need to test more, even though I feel like I test quite a lot. I still don't think that as you get more experience, it doesn't necessarily mean you need to test less.
No, absolutely. You absolutely need to keep refining, and the joy of being further on in your career or in your practice, and having that groundwork of information already from your previous tests just means that your testing can be more specific. So I always say to my students, unfortunately, there's this term that has been abused in the ceramic community called experimenting. And people are like, oh, I'm just experimenting, I'm just experimenting. I was like, that's cool, but an experiment requires a control. So first you make your control, and then you can experiment. So my control when I'm teaching glazing is I go, just glaze it perfectly in one color and well, and that's now your control. Then when you start mixing or taping or like doing double dips or doing like all the variations from that point, you'll know if any problems you encounter are from your dipping or because those glazes didn't work well together. You don't know what that's going to look like yet, so try out and find out what the unidealized original version might look like first before you start deviating. So that's what I would say about experimenting and about testing, is that you do need first a control. Another thing that happens is people will change their variables without realizing it. So another thing that people often do is they go, oh, I'm going to try all these clays first to see which one I like, and then I'm going to combine it with all the glazes and see which one I like. And I go, that's too many variables.
Too many variables, yes.
Just use the clay that's available to you. If you're in a studio that uses a white clay, use a white clay for a year, and then find out how you like the glazes. And then once you're comfortable with that, maybe think, what if I use a different clay? Or I introduce something to the clay? It's about, I have like a massive anxiety disorder, so I freak out really easily. So I kind of need a very process-based approach to things so that I know where I'm standing, because I can spin out like real quick.
So that's a sort of reassurance. But I'm interested in that as well, because this thing that we talked about just now, about like knowing what the outcome is or not knowing what the outcome is and being excited by that as opposed to being freaked out by that. I think a lot of people, when they're starting, they take some reassurance in like, well, I know what I'm working towards. I know what that goal is. I know what I want it to look like. And yes, there's a point where, as you said, that becomes boring. But I think we've all been there, right? We've all kind of thought, well, I'm not really happy with what I'm doing. I'm not really happy with this drawing, with this thing I've made. I want it to be better. I want it to look a bit more like that person's over there or that thing that I've seen. And I can kind of understand anxiety around not really knowing where things are going. Because like nobody likes walking down a path that they don't know where the end is, unless they're like a real confident adventurer. And I think it's really similar with any creative practice, that taking a path that you don't know where it's going is super hard.
Yeah, but I mean, even so, the thing that grounds your project can be the category of object or image. So you go, chairs. I'm going to focus on chairs. I don't know where chairs are going to take me, but I have used chairs. I have personal experience with chairs. What is my embodied, grounded experience of chairs, and how can I pursue that? So, for instance, an expanded version of my practice is my supper clubs and my food events. And I'm not a trained chef. I have no experience in the restaurant industry other than being a waiter. But I spend a lot of time with a very good friend of mine who has an incredible flavor library and a really, really good sense of smell and taste, and reads about like the biology of taste and how we smell and how that creates new neural pathways and all this kind of stuff. He's really like into it. And so I was just along for the ride and listening to him speak about it, and we'd cook for each other. And that's how I learned to cook. So my cooking is very specific because it's been incubated in a very unusual way.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying it's better or worse, but I would say that it's something that people aren't expecting when they sit down at my table. And I don't have experience of doing these events other than the events that I've done, right? So it's quite scary because you have 24 people paying you money to have a nice time. You're trying to like not kill any of them with anaphylaxis or food poisoning.
Yeah.
You're trying to communicate like a refined, pleasant experience that also has depth. You try not to overwhelm the participant because you don't want to give them so much information that they feel like they're out of their depth, but you want to have it layered enough that they can pursue their own thought process all the way down to the planning stage, by which I mean that the courses are all narrative. The flavors are chosen for specific reasons to communicate the theme of the evening, and they can enjoy them, or they can go, oh, I can see why I used elderflower here. We're doing a lot of work with an artist who looks at folk tradition and hedgerows, and now we have a hedgerow-themed dinner that incorporates their artwork, and the bowls look like pebbles, and it's about folklore and transidentity and the magic of transformation. And so you can follow it if you want to, but you can't overwhelm people being like, if you don't get it, you're stupid. So I never know how an event's going to go. So like my anxiety is like through the roof. But I also, the flip side of that is much like, ER nurses are a total mess in a calm situation, but completely focused when they're at work. I would say my mom's a nurse. She's a mess, but she's also very focused. So she, like I've inherited this where I can do quite well under high pressure situations, and a kitchen's quite high pressure.
Yeah.
Especially if you're making the food and the tableware and you're hosting and you're trying to platform another queer artist. There's a lot of weight, but there's also a lot of, that's where you can control the variables and allow the variables to sing for you. So because I'm not making the event about me, I'm making space for another person, another artistic variable to come in and make the event something that I couldn't even imagine. And this happened with my last event with Marv Summers, and they brought in a collaborator I hadn't even met, and they did an amazing performance, and I was in the kitchen, I could hear a pin drop, except for like some squelchy noises, and then otherwise complete silence. And I came in with the next course, and everyone was just like stunned, and I was like, well, I don't know what happened, but it looked really positive, So it is scary, but you can pursue a goal to a degree.
So, I mean, you've talked about spinning out and scary, and I really want to, if it's okay, talk about this mindset that you're starting to allow us into, because I can imagine the mindset for preparing a dinner event for people is very, very different from sitting in front of a wheel with a ball of clay. However, when I've ever done anything to do with throwing pottery, I've really been super aware that my mindset is completely affecting my temperament is affecting what happens on the wheel. And I can remember that like quite early on. My dad used to do some ceramics, and so he would kind of like, sit me at the wheel, and if I was feeling stressed, it doesn't work. If you're feeling really uptight and precious and like careful, it doesn't work. And I think I'm really keen to explore this idea of being in the right frame of mind to work, and being in the right frame of mind or temperament to start work. How can you maybe talk a little bit about the preparing the dinner versus starting to throw a bowl on a wheel? Because I think for me, or for maybe somebody listening, they feel like very, very different things, but it's still you doing it, and I think there's a certain temperament that goes with both of those.
Absolutely. I mean, I think the first thing I would say is that it's really important that we remember that as people, we are multifaceted, and that we can bring different parts of ourselves to different things. And we don't have to only be one thing to ourselves. The other thing I would say is that you're totally right that your temperament comes out in the wheel. And so I always say to my students, this object is a record of our time together. Whatever you're doing, whatever you're bringing from work, from home, or even the strength of your hands from your daily activities, the shape of your hands, the way your back is feeling, all of that comes through, and this object is recording that. And so I try to remember that when I sit at the wheel, which is not to say that there isn't room for negative or difficult feelings. It just means you actually have to sit with them. Unfortunately, that does allow intrusive thoughts in quite a hard way. And I am developing a unconscious sort of like mumble when I'm at the wheel, and I go, and it's like, don't think about that, just like sitting for 4 hours making bowls, being like, we're throwing bowls, we're not thinking about that. So,
so what is your brain doing in terms of concentration when you're there for 4 hours?
Yeah.
Trying to produce, maybe not necessarily focusing on producing 10 identical or close to identical,
but like a range for an event. Yeah, I'm very invested in this idea of relaxed attention, which is quite, the tradition of ceramics I'm working in is an Anglo-Oriental pottery tradition, which means it's
what?
Anglo-Oriental.
Okay, yeah.
So it's heavily influenced by Japanese aesthetics and a Japanese movement that happened around the Industrial Revolution in Japan that goes back to traditional craftsmanship. So that's happening in parallel with the UK, and they're basically sharing poets and sharing artists who are going back to traditional values as industrialization is heating up.
Yeah.
And a part of that is the idea of relaxed attention. So I'm present and I'm paying attention, but I'm not trying to force things one way or another. It's quite like, I don't want to say a Zen approach, because that's its own history.
And that's very conscious, right? You're very aware of doing that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it does require about 3 cups of tea, 2 pound chocolate, waking up after 10 hours of sleep, hating myself for the first half of the day, maybe throwing for a bit, being like, oh, do you know what? I'm actually not so bad at this. Getting a thing out the kiln, being like, oh, I like that, or I'm a failure, and then making some more parts. So it definitely isn't consistent, but you're trying to ride your own peaks and troughs through the day. So,
and are you getting better at doing that? Do you think as your experience grows, does it get more difficult because you've got more expectation on yourself?
No, I would say that it's about consistent. I think that I can now sit for 4 hours and throw, whereas my limit previously, maybe a year ago, was 2 hours. So that is improving. But for instance, I'm currently in I would say a productive slump with the lead up to Christmas. Having done the last event, there's no reason for me to go into the pottery and knock out like a whole dinner service in a week. But I was really enjoying maybe a month ago when I was going in and was just super productive.
Yeah.
But again, I think this is something else we have to really think about. And I don't want to say things like late stage capitalism, but we need to also realize that our job isn't to constantly be productive either, because we need to have downtime and time to think. And I think that if there's anything I can communicate in this podcast, it's that we are in winter, and winter we're supposed to slow down. And everyone will freak out about the second week of January being like, what have I done with my life? What am I doing? I need to have a project on immediately, and just give yourself to like March.
Wow.
You don't need to be...
March is like summer.
Well, not here. Yeah, here it is.
Yeah, okay. It was interesting because when you said that, I was thinking about kind of state of mind when I'm productive and when I see other people productive. And I think there's something interesting there about, I definitely feel happy when I'm being productive. I like making things. I find that satisfying. I feel like I'm doing something. And I also see the difference between when people are thinking about doing something, it can be sort of like a little bit depressive. And then when people are actually doing something, it looks more animated.
Absolutely.
I'm not trying to disconnect that from over production capitalism at all. But I think just in terms of states of mind about making work, it can often be really, really difficult to think of what you're going to work on. So I often think sometimes there's the work, but it's knowing how to work as well, which is super, super important. And it might be a discipline, it might be about 10 hours sleep, waking up, having a cup of tea, whatever it is. But actually, the process of doing the work is really, really important.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes if you're just thinking about doing something, you just kind of have to get off your ass and like do it sometimes.
I completely agree. I would like to be the person who can get to the studio for 8, throw for 4 hours, and then go to the gym for 2 hours, and then have the rest of the day to do admin.
Yeah.
And I'd be like productive and sexy and successful. And unfortunately, that's not who I am, and I am quite sad. So there are moments of me being like, God, I'm amazing, and then moments of like, I'm just gonna have to sit down for today.
Yeah.
So it's like also kind of accepting your own limitations and not seeing them as failures and embracing them as part of this, because they can be quite productive. Like moments of downtime can be productive. But I do agree with you. Just make things. Don't get stuck in the thought process.
Yeah. So do you ever go through a period where there is some sort of block or I don't know what to do?
Oh yeah, all the time.
And how do you deal with that?
Well, like you say, discipline, you just go in and you make something. I often go in being like, I don't want to make anything, but I need to show up for myself and I need to bring myself to this creative space. Nothing's going to happen if I don't come. So, and this has been part of the thing that fuels my productive spikes, is being like, I fucking hate this. I don't want to do this. Fine, I'll go in and I'll resentfully make some tea bowls. And next thing I know, I've made 20 plates instead.
With hate.
I think people don't understand how productive hate is. And resentment. Resentment is huge. Wow. I think so much is fueled by resentment, but in a beautiful way. Fortunately, I think that the kiln spiritually purifies that emotion.
Okay, so it sort of boils it out. Yeah, boils it out, gosh.
So there's room for all the emotions at the wheel, like we said. But even if you don't want to do it, if you are a maker, make things. And you'll make it out of hate and spite and be like, that's quite nice actually. And then you'll remake a set of it out of love.
I think sometimes you make something and you're like, I hate it. And then you make something and you're like, oh my God, I love it immediately. But then the thing that you hate, you put aside. And then you go back to it and be like, actually, it's kind of growing on me. I don't hate it as much as I thought. And the thing that you made that you thought was really good is like, I think that's bland. Or it's, not as interesting as it could be.
Completely agree.
So, maybe there's some room for that. I think that thing of showing up for yourself, I have that a little bit sometimes with like going running or going to the gym. I kind of just think, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this, but if I just get into my shoes and running shorts, like make that part of starting really, really easy, then the rest of it you just kind of don't have to think about. So it's like getting out of bed, getting to the bus, going to the studio, not knowing what you're going to do, but the fact that you're there is like more than half the battle sometimes.
Absolutely. I do the same thing with the wheel where I don't know what to do, and I'll just set up my wheel and then I'll go make a cup of tea and chat for 45 minutes.
Stare at it.
and then I'll like wander over accidentally and sit down.
Hi, how are you?
And then be like, oh, what? Oh, I'm throwing. It's like you have to sort of trick yourself a little bit. But I mean, like you say, breaking things into little steps is important. Like if you are wearing your running shoes, you're probably going to go running, right? So it's the same with the studio. If you're putting on your apron, you're probably going to go in paint, or you're going to go to the wheel.
Yeah, you look like a potter with an apron on, so like you're going to have to do some pottery.
And I would say that like the nice thing about ceramics that I think is very, very different from other creative practices is that you do it in a communal space. And the community around you, they're talking to you like you're a potter. and you're talking to them like they're potters, and you're in a pottery studio, and it really sets you up for making pottery because all the conditions are there to make pottery. So if someone goes, oh, I really love that thing that came out yesterday, and you're like, oh, thanks, I didn't really know what I thought about it, but yeah, I suppose it's quite nice actually, and then you make some more, and they go, oh, you're making more of that shape that I liked, and I was like, yeah, I think you're right, it does look quite nice.
So there's a dialogue.
Having that dialogue is really important, and I really feel for people like painters the painters that I know, even if they are in a communal building, they're still separated in separate rooms. And I wonder what it would look like if people had more of an open plan space, where there was an amount of privacy, but you kind of got to chat, more chatting. I'm huge about chatting.
That's why you're here. Can I ask you about the studio? What does your studio space look like that you kind of preserve for yourself in terms of maybe sketching something, sketchbook, tests, found objects, photographs? Can you describe that a little bit?
Sure thing. I mean, so because I work in a communal studio, I don't have a permanent space as my own. I do have a favourite wheel that I tend to go to.
What's she called?
I haven't named the wheel, but I have named my kiln.
Oh.
And his name is Maslow, because he looks after my hierarchy of needs.
Oh, very good. Boom, boom.
Which sometimes doesn't land,
yeah.
And then I feel really stupid. Or like I'll say it to an economist, and they're like, what? You named your kiln Maslow. But it's been renamed to, I think we landed on Jody because my friend is fostering him. So now it's Jody Foster.
So there's a communal space, so there's a sort of like hot desk system, for want of a better phrase. Is there nowhere that is just your creative space, whether it's even a book of ideas or notes or something? How do you start that process of the next thing that happens? Where do you keep it?
Well, to be honest, maybe I should have more of a private space where I could keep those things, and maybe I should have a sketchbook where I'm doing these kinds of this accumulation. But the place that actually happens, weirdly, is my lounge.
Yeah.
So at home, I do spend a lot of time sitting on the couch staring out the window, and because I am there quite a lot, I just put objects that I'm thinking about in front of me. So on the coffee table, there's some nice books, and then if there's a shape or a colour that I'm thinking about, I'll just have those dotted about. And then while I'm there on my second tea, I'll just be staring at it blankly for a bit and having a little think, being like, okay. So that is what I then take to the pottery. But I would also say maybe that the memories of the dinners also impacts it. So I maybe I'm just sort of living in my head a bit too much, but the experience of during the dinner and thinking about what that felt like in terms of the flow of it, the look of it, how I presented different kinds of food and why I presented it in that way, that is also then informing the making.
So you curate a little arrangement of things that kind of helps you get into a creative headspace.
Yes, I mean I do sometimes bring an object to work and then put it in front of me, so I can look at it while I'm making. But maybe this is the next step in my practice, is I do need maybe more of a private space or more of a settled, consistent space so that I can accrue bits and pieces. At the moment, it's kind of like starting a clean slate every time.
Yeah. I mean, I would imagine there's something good about that as well, because it kind of works I guess it works in offices. It kind of goes from having an open plan office to cubicles to hot desking, and lots of people are very kind of anti that. And certainly at art school, a lot of art schools are moving towards a hot desk space where you don't actually have anything on the wall. And I guess there's two things there. It's a kind of fresh slate every day, but then I think there's a cost, which is that it doesn't really feel like your own, or you have to bring things in and purposely put them there. Interesting. Good to know as well. I think that's good, because I think there's room for people to understand that you don't have to have a big setup to start being creative and start making. Before we finish, I've got some rapid fire this or that for you, which I'm excited because you haven't mentioned some of these, which I'm looking forward to hearing what the answers are. So don't overthink it, not too much. Pencil or marker?
Oh, don't overthink it. How does that work? Pencil.
Analog or digital?
Analog.
Monochrome or colourful?
Monochrome.
Big sketches or little sketches?
Little.
Does that go the same for like big tests, little tests?
Yeah.
Little tests. Loose sheets or pages in a sketchbook?
Loose sheets.
Keep mistakes or bin mistakes?
Keep.
Think then do, or do then think?
Ideally, do then think.
Creative chaos or calm order?
Ooh. Calm order aspirant.
Yeah, reality. Yeah.
Mostly chaos.
Okay. And then background noise or silence?
Background noise.
Oh, the hums.
Over me trying to hum over my own internal thoughts, yeah.
Finished or never finished?
Never finished.
And then lastly, to finish, would you stay up all night or would you get up early?
Up all night.
Okay.
I'm not getting up early for no one. This is why I'm unemployable.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Very, very good. Thanks for coming along.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Great to hear all this. Thank you to my guest, Will Martin, on this episode of The Empty Canvas. Please like and subscribe, and maybe share this with somebody you think needs a bit of a nudge on their own creative journey. I'll see you in the next episode.